I'm parked legally. Is there a problem?
This is resident parking only. You don't live here.
Actually, I do. That's my building right there.
I don't think so. Let me see some ID and vehicle registration.
I'm a federal agent, ATF, and yes, I live here.
Yeah, okay, nice badge. Step out of the vehicle.
Officer Brandon Hayes had 22 months on the Phoenix Police Department, but his record already showed a disturbing pattern that nobody wanted to address. He generated 9 complaints in less than 2 years. Every single one involved women of color, questioned in spaces Hayes didn't think they belonged. One scorching afternoon in Scottsdale, that pattern would cost the city $6,700,000 and end his career in spectacular fashion. The woman in the car was Special Agent Nicole Foster, a 14-year veteran with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. She lived in the luxury apartment building Hayes was parked in front of. She'd just returned from the gym. She was sitting in her legally parked Mercedes, checking her phone before going inside. But Officer Hayes saw a black woman in an expensive car in an affluent neighborhood and decided something must be wrong. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Scottsdale, Arizona, a city known for upscale shopping, golf resorts, and some of the most expensive real estate in the Southwest. The kind of place where BMWs and Mercedes line the streets, where apartment buildings have valet service and rooftop pools. It was 3:30 on a Thursday afternoon in September. The temperature was 104 degrees, the kind of heat that makes asphalt shimmer and air conditioning a necessity. Special Agent Nicole Foster had been with ATF for 14 years. 14 years investigating firearms trafficking, gang violence, and explosives cases across the Southwest. She'd worked undercover operations that took down illegal gun rings moving weapons from Arizona to Mexico. She'd coordinated with Mexican federal police on cross-border trafficking investigations. She testified in federal court 31 times. Her work had resulted in over 200 criminal convictions. Her case closure rate was among the highest in the Phoenix Field Division. That afternoon, she'd finished a workout at her gym 3 blocks from her apartment. She was wearing athletic gear, black leggings, a gray tank top, her hair pulled back. She'd driven back to her building in her silver Mercedes E-Class, a car she'd saved 3 years to buy. She'd parked in her assigned spot in the resident lot. She was sitting with the air conditioning running, scrolling through work emails on her personal phone before heading upstairs to shower. Nothing illegal, nothing suspicious, just a federal agent finishing her afternoon routine. Nicole was 38 years old. She'd grown up in South Phoenix, the daughter of a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep them housed and fed. She'd put herself through Arizona State University, working nights at a call center. She'd graduated with honors in criminal justice. She'd applied to ATF straight out of college and been accepted after a rigorous background investigation and psychological evaluation. She'd spent 6 months at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia. She'd excelled in firearms training, tactical operations, and investigative procedures. Her career had been built on competence and determination. She'd earned every promotion, every commendation, every assignment. She owned her apartment outright after years of saving. She drove a car she'd paid cash for. She built a life that her mother was proud of, a life that proved you could escape poverty through education and service. But to Officer Brandon Hayes, none of that mattered. All he saw was a black woman who couldn't possibly belong in that neighborhood. Officer Brandon Hayes had been with Phoenix Police for 22 months. His academy performance had been marginal. He'd struggled with de-escalation training. His instructors noted a tendency to view situations as confrontational, even when they weren't. He'd barely passed his psychological evaluation. The examiner had flagged concerns about authority issues and racial bias, but recommended he be given a chance with close supervision. That close supervision never materialized. Hayes was assigned to a patrol district in North Phoenix and Scottsdale, one of the most affluent areas in the city. His training officer signed off on him after the minimum required period, noting that Hayes was enthusiastic but needed continued mentoring. The mentoring never happened. Hayes was released to solo patrol and the complaint started almost immediately. The first complaint came 3 months into his solo work. Hayes had stopped a Latina woman loading groceries into her Lexus SUV outside of Whole Foods. He demanded proof the vehicle was hers. She owned it. She had the registration. She filed a complaint. Internal Affairs reviewed it. Hayes claimed the vehicle matched a stolen car report. It didn't. The complaint was closed with counseling. The second complaint came from an Asian woman jogging through a gated community. Hayes had stopped her, questioned why she was there, and asked to see identification. She lived there. She was a cardiologist. She filed a complaint. IA reviewed it. Hayes said she looked lost. The complaint was closed with additional training requirements. The pattern continued. A black woman waiting in her car outside a private school. Hayes accused her of surveillance. She was picking up her nephew. Another complaint, an Indian woman sitting on a bench in a shopping plaza. Hayes questioned her presence. She was waiting for her husband. Another complaint, a Middle Eastern woman photographing architecture downtown. Hayes detained her for suspicious activity. She was a professional photographer on assignment. Another complaint, 9 complaints in 22 months. 9 women of color. 9 situations where Hayes assumed criminal activity based solely on race and setting. And 9 times Internal Affairs closed the cases with warnings, counseling, or training requirements, but no real consequences. Hayes stayed on patrol. His supervisors knew about the pattern. They discussed it in private, but they didn't remove him from the field. They didn't mandate intensive retraining. They didn't place him on desk duty pending psychological reevaluation. They just kept closing complaints and hoping he'd improve. He didn't. That Thursday afternoon, Hayes was driving through Scottsdale on routine patrol. He'd responded to a minor fender bender earlier. He'd issued 2 speeding tickets. Now he was cruising through an upscale apartment complex, checking for parking violations or suspicious activity. He drove past the resident lot and saw Nicole Foster sitting in her Mercedes, a black woman, in a luxury car, in a building where monthly rent started at $3,000. Hayes' mind didn't process resident checking her phone. It processed vehicle theft suspect, someone using a stolen car, someone who needed to be investigated. He pulled into the lot and parked behind her Mercedes, blocking her in. Do you think officers profile based on assumptions about who can afford to live in wealthy areas? Drop your answer below. Nicole noticed the patrol car in her rearview mirror. She watched Hayes get out and approach her driver's side window. She'd been a federal agent long enough to know when something was about to go sideways. She put her phone down. She kept her hands visible on the steering wheel. She waited. Hayes walked up and tapped on her window with his knuckle. Nicole pressed the button to lower it halfway. "Excuse me," she said calmly. "I'm parked legally. Is there a problem?" Hayes leaned down slightly, his sunglasses reflecting her face. "This is resident parking only. You don't live here." Nicole kept her voice neutral. "Actually, I do. That's my building right there." She gestured toward the entrance 20 yards away. Hayes looked at the building, then back at her. "I don't think so. Let me see some ID and vehicle registration. Can I ask what this is about? I'm parked in my assigned spot. I live in Unit 412. ID and registration." Now, Nicole felt the familiar weight of it settling over her. The presumption of wrongdoing, the automatic disbelief, the refusal to accept her word. She'd experienced it countless times in her life, but never from a police officer in her own parking lot. "Officer," she said carefully, "I'm a federal agent, ATF, and yes, I live here." Hayes' expression didn't change. "Sure you do. Step out of the vehicle." And there it was, the moment where bias overrode evidence, the moment where a black woman's credentials meant nothing because they didn't fit Hayes' mental picture of who gets to live in luxury apartments. Nicole made a decision. She pulled out her phone and started recording. "I'm documenting this interaction. You've ordered me out of my vehicle without cause. I'm a federal agent parked legally in my own apartment complex. Put the phone down and step out of the vehicle. No, I have the right to record this, and I'm not stepping out without you explaining your reasonable suspicion." Hayes' face flushed. His hand moved to his duty belt. "I said step out." Nicole kept the phone steady, aimed at Hayes through the window. "Officer Hayes, badge number visible on your uniform. September 21st, 3:32 p.m. You've detained a federal ATF agent at her residence without legal justification." A woman walking to her car nearby stopped and watched. She pulled out her phone and started recording too. She recognized Nicole from building events. They'd spoken at the pool last weekend. "Officer," the woman called out, "that's Nicole. She lives here. What's going on?" Hayes turned toward her. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. Keep moving." "It does concern me. You're harassing my neighbor. I'm conducting an investigation." "Into what?" "She's sitting in her car in her own parking spot." Hayes turned back to Nicole, frustrated now. "Last chance. Step out or I'll remove you." Nicole's training kicked in. She knew how to de-escalate, knew how to document, knew how to protect herself legally. "Officer Hayes, I'm gonna reach for my credentials. They're in my gym bag on the passenger seat. I'm telling you what I'm doing before I do it. Keep your hands where I can see them. They are where you can see them." Nicole reached slowly across to the passenger seat and pulled her gym bag over. She unzipped it and retrieved her ATF credentials. She held them up to the window. "Special Agent Nicole Foster, ATF Phoenix Field Division. Badge number right here. I've been with the Bureau for 14 years. This is my car, registered to me. This is my apartment building. where I've lived for 3 years, and you've stopped me without any legal reason. Hayes barely glanced at the credentials. Those could be fake. The neighbor who was still recording spoke up again. Officer, those are real. Nicole's a federal agent. Everyone in this building knows her. You need to call your supervisor. Hayes ignored her. He grabbed the handle of Nicole's car door. Step out, now. Nicole kept her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. If you open that door, you're assaulting a federal agent. I'm not resisting. I'm not fleeing. I'm simply refusing an unlawful order. Hayes yanked the door open. Should officers face criminal charges for refusing to verify federal credentials? Let me know what you think. This is where everything accelerated beyond Hayes' control. The moment he opened that door, he crossed from unlawful detention into assault on a federal officer. Nicole's neighbor had called 911. Building security was on the way, and Nicole's phone was capturing every second. Nicole remained seated, her credentials still held up. You just assaulted a federal agent on camera. I hope your career was worth it. Hayes reached for her arm. Get out of the vehicle. Nicole pulled her arm back. Don't touch me. I'm calling my supervisor right now. She switched to her phone app and dialed. It rang twice before Special Agent in Charge, Thomas Rodriguez, answered. Rodriguez. Tom, it's Foster. I'm being detained by a Phoenix PD officer in my apartment parking lot. He's refusing to verify my credentials and just opened my car door. I need someone here now. Rodriguez's voice immediately sharpened. Where are you? Scottsdale address. The address. My building. I'm recording the interaction. Don't move. Don't engage. I'm sending 2 agents and notifying Phoenix Command immediately. Hayes heard the entire conversation. His face had gone from flushed to pale. The confidence was draining away as reality set in. A security guard from the building arrived. What's the problem here, officer? Hayes turned to him. I'm investigating a suspicious vehicle. The guard looked at Nicole and smiled. Agent Foster? You're investigating Agent Foster? She lives here. She's on the board of our residents association. Hayes didn't respond. His radio crackled. A supervisor was being dispatched. Multiple units were responding. Federal agents were en route. The situation he'd created with his bias was now spiraling into a departmental crisis. 2 more residents had stopped to watch. Both were recording. Both recognized Nicole. One was a retired Phoenix PD captain who lived on the 6th floor. The retired captain walked over. Officer, I'm Captain Davis, retired Phoenix PD. I know Agent Foster personally. She's lived here for years. You need to end this immediately and apologize. Hayes finally found his voice. I have reasonable suspicion. You have bias, Davis cut him off. Not suspicion, bias. And it's being documented by 6 people right now. Nicole remained in her car, engine still running, air conditioning still on, phone still recording. Her supervisor had told her not to move, so she didn't. She just sat there documenting Officer Hayes destroying his own career in real time. 3 Phoenix PD vehicles arrived within minutes. The first out was Sergeant Maria Santos, a 19-year veteran who'd built her reputation on community relations and accountability. She saw the scene and immediately understood what had happened. She'd reviewed Hayes' complaint file 2 weeks earlier and recommended he be placed on administrative duty pending retraining. Her recommendation had been ignored. Hayes, Santos called out sharply. Step away from the vehicle. Sarge, I stopped a suspicious vehicle. That's Agent Foster, ATF. She lives here, and you just created a federal incident. Santos walked to Nicole's car. Agent Foster, I'm Sergeant Santos. I apologize for this situation. May I see your credentials? Nicole handed them through the window. Santos examined them carefully. Then she looked at the building, the assigned parking sign, the registration sticker on Nicole's windshield that matched the apartment complex. She turned back to Hayes, her voice cold with controlled fury. You stopped a federal agent in her own parking lot? She looked suspicious. She looked black, Santos interrupted. That's what you mean. And you've done this 9 times now. 9 complaints in 22 months. All women of color. All in situations where you assumed they didn't belong. Hayes started to respond, but Santos held up her hand. Don't. Just don't. Give me your badge and weapon. 2 ATF vehicles pulled into the lot. Special Agent in Charge, Rodriguez, stepped out with another agent. He walked directly to Nicole's car. Foster, you okay? Physically, yes. Professionally, furious. Rodriguez nodded. We'll handle this. He turned to Sergeant Santos. I'm Sac Rodriguez, ATF Phoenix. Agent Foster is one of my best agents. She's worked cases that have saved lives. And your officer just assaulted her on camera in front of multiple witnesses. Santos's expression showed her complete agreement. He's being removed from duty immediately. Phoenix PD will be filing a full report and cooperating completely with any federal investigation. We'll be filing charges, Rodriguez said quietly. This isn't just a bad stop. This is assault on a federal officer. The small crowd of residents watched as Hayes handed over his badge and weapon. His hands were shaking. His face had gone gray. The full weight of what he'd done was finally hitting him. Building security had pulled the parking lot camera footage. The retired captain was giving a witness statement. Nicole's neighbor was sending her video to Santos. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. Nicole finally stepped out of her car, her phone still in hand, her credentials still visible. She looked at Hayes directly. Officer Hayes, I work to keep this city safe. I investigate gun traffickers who arm gangs and cartels. I've put my life on the line for this community. And you just treated me like a criminal in my own home because you couldn't imagine a black woman living here. Hayes looked at the ground. He had no response, no excuse, no defense. Nicole turned to Rodriguez. I want a full investigation, federal charges, and I want to know how an officer with 9 complaints was allowed to keep patrolling. You'll have all of it, Rodriguez promised. Why do some officers see successful black women as impossible rather than accomplished? Comment your thoughts. By 6 p.m., the story was spreading through law enforcement channels. By 9 p.m., it was on local news. By midnight, it had gone national. ATF agent detained in her own apartment parking lot. Phoenix cop assaults federal agent for sitting in her car while black. Video shows officer refusing credentials, forcing door open. Federal charges expected an attack on ATF agent. The headlines captured the absurdity and the outrage. A decorated federal agent, 14 years of service, sitting in her own parking space, treated like a criminal by an officer who'd accumulated 9 complaints in less than 2 years and faced no real consequences until he assaulted someone with federal backing. ATF issued a statement within hours. Special Agent Nicole Foster is an exemplary agent who has dedicated her career to public safety. The conduct displayed by Officer Hayes was unacceptable and criminal. We are coordinating with Phoenix PD and will pursue federal charges for assault on a federal officer. Phoenix Police Department statement came next. We are aware of today's incident involving one of our officers and an ATF agent. Officer Hayes has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. We take this matter with the utmost seriousness and will cooperate fully with federal authorities. The mayor of Phoenix called ATF leadership personally to apologize. The police chief visited Nicole's field office the next day to deliver a formal apology in person. But apologies don't undo violations. They don't erase the moment when a federal agent had to defend her right to exist in her own home. Civil rights attorneys contacted Nicole within 24 hours. The case was extraordinary. A federal agent with impeccable credentials, an officer with 9 prior complaints showing clear pattern, assault on camera from multiple angles, witnesses including a retired police captain, body camera footage showing everything. This wasn't just winnable. This was a civil rights landmark. The lawsuit named Officer Brandon Hayes, the supervisors who'd ignored his complaint pattern, and the Phoenix Police Department. The claims were extensive and damning. Unlawful detention without reasonable suspicion, racial profiling and discrimination, assault and battery, violation of federal civil rights, false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, failure to train, supervise, and discipline officers with biased complaints, deliberate indifference to pattern of discrimination. Phoenix's city attorneys reviewed everything: the videos, the body camera footage, the 9 prior complaints, Hayes' minimal training, the recommendations from Sergeant Santos that had been ignored, the retired captain's statement, Nicole's spotless 14-year record. The conclusion came quickly and definitively. This case could not be defended, not in front of a jury, not in federal court, not with this evidence. Phoenix settled 14 months later, $6,700,000 paid to Special Agent Nicole Foster, the largest settlement in Arizona history for racial profiling by law enforcement. The money came from taxpayers, the same public Nicole had spent 14 years protecting, but who had failed to protect her from an officer whose bias had been documented 9 times before he targeted a federal agent. Officer Brandon Hayes was terminated 9 weeks after the incident. His termination letter was comprehensive and final. Officer Hayes demonstrated a sustained pattern of racial profiling documented through 9 complaints over 22 months. His detention and assault of Special Agent Foster was without legal justification and motivated by racial bias. His refusal to verify legitimate federal credentials demonstrated willful disregard for proper procedure. His use of physical force against a federal agent constituted assault and criminal conduct. His employment is terminated immediately. He is permanently barred from re-employment with Phoenix PD or any affiliated agency. Hayes' name went into the National Decertification Index. His law enforcement career ended at age 24. He would never wear a badge again. Not in Arizona. Not in any state. The union declined to represent him after reviewing the videos. Federal prosecutors charged him with assault on a federal officer. He pleaded guilty to avoid trial. He received 18 months probation, 200 hours community service, and a permanent criminal record. Hayes issued a statement through his attorney. I made serious errors in judgment that resulted in harm to Special Agent Foster. I allowed bias to override my training, and I failed to act with the professionalism expected of law enforcement. I take full responsibility and apologize to Agent Foster, ATF, and the community. The apology meant nothing. The damage was permanent. The 3 supervisors who'd ignored recommendations to remove Hayes from patrol were disciplined. 1 was demoted, 2 were transferred. None were fired, despite their role in enabling Hayes' pattern to continue until it targeted a federal agent. Phoenix police faced unprecedented scrutiny. How had Hayes survived 9 complaints? Why hadn't Sergeant Santos' recommendation been followed? What training existed to address officers with documented bias? Who was reviewing complaint patterns before they escalated to assaults? The Department of Justice opened a comprehensive investigation into Phoenix PD's handling of discrimination complaints. Federal monitors were assigned for 3 years. Sweeping reforms were mandated and tracked. Automatic desk duty after 2 substantiated complaints of bias. Mandatory psychological reevaluation after 3 complaints. Termination after 4 substantiated complaints with no appeals. Real-time tracking of all stops with demographic analysis. Quarterly public reports on complaint patterns. Independent civilian review board with termination authority. Supervisors held accountable for ignoring recommendations about problem officers. Special Agent Nicole Foster testified before the Phoenix City Council. Her testimony was measured, powerful, and devastating. I've spent 14 years investigating criminals. I've testified in federal court dozens of times. I've been shot at, threatened. I've worked undercover operations where my life depended on my training and judgment. And none of that mattered to Officer Hayes. All he saw was a black woman in a place he decided I couldn't belong. Not based on evidence, based on bias. Based on the assumption that people who look like me don't drive Mercedes or live in luxury apartments. That bias put me in danger in my own home. And if I hadn't been a federal agent with resources and institutional backing, I'd probably be just another complaint that got closed with a warning. She paused, her voice dropping but intensifying. 9 women came before me. 9 women who complained about Officer Hayes. 9 times your department had the chance to remove him before he escalated to assault. 9 times they chose to protect him instead of protecting the community. And it took him assaulting a federal agent before anyone took it seriously. Think about what that means. Think about the message it sends. The council chamber was silent. Several members had visible tears. The police chief looked at the floor. The city manager took notes furiously. Nicole used a significant portion of her settlement to establish a foundation supporting women of color in law enforcement. She wanted to create mentorship programs, scholarship funds, and support networks. She wanted the next generation to have backup she hadn't had, to see themselves in positions of authority, to know they belonged regardless of who questioned it. The incident changed her. She still worked at ATF, still investigated firearms trafficking, still served her community, but she was more cautious now, more aware, more alert to how she was perceived. The easy confidence of moving through the world without expecting to be profiled, that was gone. Hayes had stolen that from her. She resented it, but she refused to let it stop her. Should officers with multiple bias complaints be banned from law enforcement permanently? Let me know in the comments. This wasn't just about one bad stop. This was about what happens when systems protect officers with documented bias until they target someone powerful enough to fight back. Officer Brandon Hayes didn't suddenly become biased when he saw Nicole Foster. He'd been profiling women of color for nearly 2 years. 9 complaints, 9 different women, 9 situations where he assumed criminality based on race and setting. And each time, the system gave him another chance. More training, more counseling, more warnings, but no real consequences. No removal from the street, no mandatory psychological help, no acknowledgement that the pattern meant something serious. So Hayes kept patrolling, kept profiling, kept violating rights, until he made the mistake of targeting a federal agent with 14 years of service and institutional backing. The 9 women before Nicole didn't have that backing. They filed complaints that got closed. They experienced the violation and moved on because the system told them Hayes' behavior was being addressed. But it wasn't. It was being documented and ignored. That's how systemic bias works. It protects officers until the cost of protection becomes too high, until someone with resources and credentials forces accountability, until the lawsuit settlement threatens the budget. Brandon Hayes' career is over. That's justice. Phoenix paid $6,700,000. That's accountability. The supervisors who enabled him were disciplined. That's consequence. But none of it undoes the violation. None of it restores Nicole's sense of safety in her own home. None of it gives back the simple right to sit in your car without having to defend your existence. The real question is, what changes now? Do departments finally remove officers after 2 substantiated complaints instead of waiting for 9? Do they finally hold supervisors accountable when they ignore removal recommendations? Do they finally accept that pattern recognition is early warning, not bureaucratic annoyance? Because if we don't fix the system that gave Brandon Hayes 9 chances to change, if we don't address the assumptions that taught him successful black women are impossible rather than reality, then we're just waiting for the next officer, the next victim, the next multi-million-dollar settlement that changes nothing about the culture that created the problem. Comment if you believe any officer with 3 substantiated bias complaints should be permanently decertified with no exceptions. And if you believe stories like this deserve attention. If you think accountability requires visibility and reform starts with awareness, then hit that subscribe button, because we're going to keep exposing these patterns. We're going to keep demanding better. We're going to keep fighting for communities where federal agents can sit in their cars without being assaulted, where women of color can exist in affluent neighborhoods without being questioned, where your credentials and accomplishments matter more than your skin color. This isn't just about one officer or one agent. It's about all of us and the system we're willing to tolerate.